Well, of course he isn't a Churchill.
Well, now, 4 people have been arrested on suspicion of acting for Iran's intelligence agency. They're accused of spying on individuals and locations linked to London's Jewish community. The Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood says police and security services won't hesitate to take action. Sir Richard Dearlove, former head of MI6, joins me now. Good afternoon, Sir Richard.
Good afternoon, Cathy.
We'll come back to the spying issue in just a moment, but the US justified war by saying that Iran posed an imminent threat. I just wonder, in general terms, how big the threat to the UK is from Iran.
Well, I don't think there's a direct military threat to the UK mainland. Obviously, there is a threat to our interests in the Middle East, whether it's military bases within range of Iran or, let's say, British citizens, soldiers maybe on posts in Iraq, or there are all sorts of small pockets of British interest there, and it's clear that the Iranians are sort of lashing out, trying to widen the conflict and drag in, even some of their Arab allies.
And let's just deal with the spy issue then at the moment, because there have been these arrests by counter-terrorism police, 4 people on suspicion of spying on the Jewish community here in the UK. Are there, do we need to be concerned about the scale of Iran-backed plots here on British soil?
Yes, I think there is some concern about that. I don't think we need to sort of exaggerate the danger. But on the other hand, there are known Shia mosques in London which were sympathetic or are sympathetic to the current Iranian regime. And I'm quite sure that these arrests indicate probably an ongoing investigation, which is being conducted by MI5. This is my guess. And, if you're looking at a possible terrorist conspiracy or plot, the question is, at what point do you intervene? Do you let it run? Do you let it intervene? And I think probably because of the heightened danger now that we're in direct conflict with Iran, then they've decided to intervene and pull people in. But to understand this, the police have used the phrase an ongoing investigation. So it's something clearly which has been running for some time and probably has been under surveillance by special branch, by the security service, who've been looking at these people and seeing what they're doing. It sounds, from what we've been told, as though they were wrecking potential Jewish targets in London.
Many are arguing that it's long past time that the IRGC should be prescribed in this country. The EU, the US already have. Do you find it strange that the UK hasn't?
Yeah, I've been a long time advocate for prescribing the IRGC because it's quite clear that it's the sort of vehicle for arm's length terrorism conducted by the Iranian state. And I've given a number of interviews. I've been saying that for a couple of years now.
Well, let's talk about the war more broadly, because the Justice Secretary, David Lammy, said that striking missile sites within Iran to prevent the launch of attacks would be legal. What's your response to that?
Well, I'm not an international lawyer, and their opinions are, I think, notoriously subjective on these issues. But if Lammy has said that, you can be sure that the Attorney General has advised him that there is an interpretation which makes it legal under international law. And if you ask me my opinion, as they have attacked a sovereign base area, and possibly intelligence tells us they have plans to attack other British interests in the Middle East, yes, it would be legal in that case.
Is there a risk, though, that the UK is becoming sort of further embroiled in this war? There's a risk of the fallout of all of this, but, blowback in terms of hatred and generations to come suffering that, as we saw after the Iraq War?
To an extent. But, let's face it, we've been in a confrontational situation, not a conflict situation with Iran for a very long time. And there's a long history of enmity or tension okay, we've had diplomatic representation there, but, we're characterized as the little Satan, the closest ally of the United States. I think it's very hard to make these separations and, bear in mind that the UK's strategic interest, its national security, is very, very closely linked with the United States. So inevitably, when they go to war, we're faced with difficult decisions. And we've seen that playing out with the present government. I mean, frankly, I'm of the view that probably we have little option, but in some way to support the Americans. And you've seen government policy in the last few days changing in that general direction so that they can use the US Air Force base at Fairford in Gloucestershire and probably Diego Garcia as well.
Was Keir Starmer too slow to change in that respect, though? I mean, he's treading this difficult path, isn't he, between staying close to the US but also respecting domestic political and legal opinion. And the fact that he changed his mind on those bases and the use of those bases, is it weakness?
Yes, I think it's damaging to our reputation. And you can support the Americans and agree for them to use our bases without becoming directly engaged in the conflict. It's an alliance which is of such importance to us in terms of our own national security that I think we should have, as it were, honoured that commitment from the day one. But obviously, people in the Labour Party or in the Labour government didn't take that view and argued against it in the initial 24 hours.
But isn't it understandable that people in the Labour Party are haunted by what happened in Iraq and the mistakes that were made during that conflict?
To an extent, yes, but I've got strong views about Iraq, and if you've got about an hour,
well, I'd like to distill some of those views in the next sort of a couple of minutes, because I mean, of course, you were in charge of MI6 during the Iraq War. The Chilcot review was pretty rude about the intelligence findings and how flawed they were. One piece of bad information piled on top of another. You were criticised yourself in the report, taking the rap for MI6's faulty intelligence. Can you see parallels between what panned out in the Iraq War and what's happening now vis-a-vis the justification for what's going on in Iran?
Well, I don't agree with some of your comments about Iraq at all. I don't agree with all that's in the Chilcot report. It was a report about British government process. It was not a report which really looked into the intelligence in Iraq. The inquiry didn't visit Iraq, they didn't talk to any Iraqis, and I think that their view was highly partial, but we can leave that to one side. I appreciate that my views are minority views, but they are extremely well informed.
Do you see a parallel that worries you, though, with what happened then and what happens now?
No, I don't. I think it's obvious to go back to these conflicts and draw a parallel. But this is Iran, it's not Iraq, it's a very different country. There are no boots on the ground. The build-up to it has been completely different in terms of the Israeli defeat of the Axis of Resistance. Obviously, there would be dangers if the Americans and the Israelis were to put boots on the ground. I don't think that that's going to happen in this particular instance. I think the Americans are relying on an Iranian-driven outcome. That may be naive and it may not happen. But on the other hand, if they destroy completely the authority of the theocratic regime, if they completely weaken the capacity of the IRGC and Iran's capacity to strike out, let's see what happens. But it's a huge risk. Iran is a country of 90 million, very sophisticated in its own ways. It's not going to fall over, but its politics may change under this sort of pressure.
So it's possible that this huge risk, as you put it, by Donald Trump could pay off?
Well, I've been doing podcasts myself and interviewing well-informed people. I think there is a possibility it could pay off. I think I put the percentage risk pretty low, but I think we have to consider the possibility, I'm not saying probability, that Trump's policy may succeed.
And just finally, you talked about Keir Starmer's damaging, I think you said it was, that it was damaging how he changed his mind on the use of the bases. Given that you were there observing Tony Blair lead the argument on Iraq, in the run-up to the Iraq War and then throughout and then the aftermath, of course, how do you think, from a sort of diplomatic perspective, how do you think Keir Starmer compares to Tony Blair?
Well, I think Blair was a conviction politician who had a strong sense of what he felt was the right thing to do. I think that actually the intervention in Iraq went wrong after the military engagement. And what I mean by that is that the fault was to disband the Iraqi military. Now, this is an important point because it's quite possible in Iran that the means of changing the government may be the Iranian military, which is more nationalistic and less theocratic, if you see what I mean, comparing it with the present regime. And you could get a group of Iranian generals who would not necessarily be friendly to the West, but they might be more amenable in negotiation, who would move in and form a new government with support of, let's say, the Kurds, the Baluchis, and some of the other ethnic minorities within Iran. So, I mean, there is a similarity there, and I think that the fundamental mistake in Iraq was when Bremer disbanded the Iraqi military, which left the country in a total vacuum with no authority to control and run it. And then you had this Fedayeen uprising in Iraq, which turned into ISIS, essentially.
You described Blair as a conviction politician. You sort of didn't finish the thought on Keir Starmer and how he compares. I mean, Donald Trump offered the view that he's no Churchill.
Keir Starmer is a human rights lawyer, and he thinks like a human rights lawyer rather than like a politician. I mean, he vacillates between these two poles, and I think one sees that in a lot of his policies and changes of policy.
Well, yeah, so what's the consequences for us as a country that's who we have leading and in that position?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's, I'm a public critic. I'm known to be a critic of the current government in terms of aspects of its foreign policy. And I think we're in a better place than we were a few days ago, but we could have been in a better place right from the start.
So no Churchill, you'd sort of agree with Donald Trump's verdict on Keir Starmer?
Well, of course he isn't a Churchill.
Sir Richard Dearlove, thank you very much for joining me. Former head of MI6 there, giving his view on the long historical parallels and the political and diplomatic context of this war that we're seeing unfold in the Middle East.